Are we good even? Yeah. Cool, awesome. Alrighty. Morning everyone, welcome to our Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee meeting of the 13th of March. To councillors, community board members and chairs and to members of the public, no mai haere mai, welcome. We have three pretty decent items on our agenda today, and we'll aim to be wrapped up by around 12:30. But we've obviously got 3 hours allotted for the meeting, so can use all of that time as well. Getting into our council blessing, ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take e kei mua i o mātou aro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara hua pai mo ngā hapore e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa kia whaihua kia tōtika tā mātou mahi a mā te maia te tiro whakamua me te hihiri ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion. Apologies, Kim Tahiwi of Ngā Hapua Ōtaki is attending the hui via Zoom, and Councillor Kofod will attempt to join on Zoom intermittently when his internet connection allows, and Councillor Cooper is on a leave of absence. I'll move that we accept those apologies. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Pravanov, all those in favour? Aye. Against, that is carried. Declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda, Richard Mansell.
Item 9.1, there is a possibility of a perceived conflict of interest. I have looked at the subject and I don't believe that I do have a conflict of interest, so we'll continue to participate in any discussions, noting that I don't get a vote.
Okay, thank you for at least identifying that perceived conflict, but coming to the conclusion that it's not an actual conflict. No one else. Public speaking time for items relating to the agenda. Kim Hobson, welcome to the table. Kim speaking to item 9.1, the initial decision on Welland Developments Limited private plan change. Kim, if you could press the button on the right hand side, and then you've got 3 minutes.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. I just wish to highlight the fact that obviously we're discussing the Somerset development at the meeting today. Part of the issue I see is during the resource consent process, there is no consideration for any social services in that application. Somerset have made it clear to me that there's probably going to be around about 500 homes built in there. Their occupancy rate is 1.3 to 1, so you're looking at around about 600 people going in there. Traditionally they source those people from the Kapiti region, claiming that that does not put a stress on our resources in Kapiti. However, the national average for occupancy is 2.7 to 1, so the homes that they vacate are populated at 2.7, so effectively the 500 residents that they put in, that they remove and put into their village, we end up with well over 1,000 increase in our social services demand, such as education, medical, and buses, everything that goes along with it. What I'm trying to suggest is that we can get the social services aspect included in part of the resource consent process. The other item is that Somerset have got a requirement that there's footpaths to their gate. Currently down Ratanui Road there's no footpaths, and that would be at an expense to us as ratepayers to subsidise the Somerset development. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against development in the area. I just believe that it should be us as existing ratepayers should not be burdened in any way or costs to bring developments into the area.
Thank you, Kim. I think, are there any questions from elected members?
Yeah, I
Sorry,
have.
Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for coming in. And yes, I think you do raise concerns that we are aware of around this table, around our social services and the demands on those, and the challenges that exist in today's climate with central government funding, etc. Just a question, have you been to the Ratanui Road suggested location of this plan change?
Only to the front gate.
Okay. So you are aware that there is a footpath down Ratanui Road?
Yes, but it's not wide enough for, 2 mobile scooters to pass each other, like you had to change down Mazengarb Road where the footpath supposedly wasn't wide enough for 2 scooters to pass each other, so that was all dug up and replaced, and I've never seen 2 scooters on there.
So the issue that you're raising, just clarify from my opinion, around the footpaths is that they're not wide enough, not that there isn't one, but we're potentially going to have to upgrade them to be wider?
Yes, you'll have to upgrade it
Okay,
and
cool.
increase the bus services somehow down there as well, because that's obviously another demand or requirement so that the residents can get to shopping.
Okay. I note that some of those are addressed in the application themselves in regards to the public transport anyway, but thank you. I appreciate your input in answering that around the concern on the footpath being the widening, not just building new ones. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just basically what Lawrence has said, actually. Good on you for raising these things. So I won't reiterate what Lawrence has said, but yeah, they'll get raised in questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. A really well-considered contribution to the meeting. And as Councillor Wilson said, it's likely that some of these questions will be posed directly to staff during this item on the agenda. So feel free to stick around.
Yeah. My concern is that it is not actually a consideration. Social upgrades are not considered during any of the resource consent process. And particularly in Kapiti's situation, it should be, because we are lacking considerably in social resources, particularly around medical facilities. You know, we're already triaged, 6-8 weeks to get to see a doctor, and by bringing in close on 2,000 to 3,000 additional residents in, they don't bring in 2 to 3 the doctors' facilities for 2,000 to 3,000, and as everyone's aware, we still don't have a hospital. We're the only region in New Zealand that does not have a hospital with a population of more than 50,000.
Thank you, Kim. I'm not seeing any further questions, so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we don't have anyone else on our list of public speakers for items relating to the agenda this morning, so we'll move on to deputations, of which there are none. Members' business, leave of absence, you can request one through the Mayor's office. Matters of an urgent nature, we have none today. Updates, also none, so that takes us to 9 reports. 9.1, initial decision on Welham Development's private plan change, so welcoming Jason Holland to the table. And Gina Sweetman as well. Thank you both. Oh, did you want to do an intro first, Chris? Let's go. All right, we'll pass over to Chris to, briefly intro the paper before handing over to other staff.
Thank you. Just while our staff settle, I just thought I'd open to clarify that today we are bringing to the table a decision for you around a private plan change that follows a, I guess, centrally set process where we are required to consider private plan changes as they come to us. You're not being asked to make a decision on the, I'll say it this way, the outcome of the private plan change. You're being asked to make a decision that's right at the beginning of receiving a private plan change as to what happens with the next steps of it. Jason and Gina are going to talk to you about that today, about what it involves and where things head to from here. I just wanted to make sure that as we enter this discussion, we're really clear that there's going to be a series of points that this comes back to you, and this is the first point in that discussion. So with that said, I will hand over to the team. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. This is the first private plan change that Council has begun to process for quite a long time. One of the main reasons for that is it took so long to get the existing district plan to an operative state, and you can't do private plan changes until you've got an operative district plan. So the magical moment in 2021 when we got it operative was great, and from that point forward it has been possible for people to lodge private plan changes. But this is actually the first one that's been formally lodged since the plan was made operative in June 2021. You have a report in front of you which has got the good oil on the process for a private plan change and all of the various steps that the RMA sets out. You've also got in this paper itself a summary of what the Wellhome Developments Limited private plan change request is all about. And as is typical with a district plan paper before you, there's a fair wad of paper attached to it, which is the details of the actual request, including a Section 32 evaluation, which is an important document that you need to, and I think the technical words in the RMA is have regard to. Expert. It's an important document, and it walks through the justification from Wellhome's perspective for why what it is they're proposing makes sense and is appropriate. As Chris has said, the private plan change process is set out in law. It's a little bit different than the usual plan change process, but not much. This first step is really the main point of difference. This first step has been described in this paper as a bit of a coarse filter to basically check that the proposal is in order and is suitable for going through the rest of the process. As Chris has said, this first step is not about the actual determination. There hasn't been submissions yet. There hasn't been a hearings panel that's given its very serious and expert consideration to those submissions. You haven't seen a hearing panel report with all of that having been worked through. This is before that happens. You've got some choices to make today. Your choice is, do you accept this for further processing or adopt it as turn it into, in essence, a council initiated plan change? Do you reject it? And there are limited grounds for that, and they are set out in the Act. Or do you convert it? Do you convert that request to a resource consent application, which hardly ever happens at this stage because smart people would have figured out by now if that would have been a goer. And for that reason in the paper, that's not an option that's recommended. We have worked through all of those options in the paper. We've looked at accept, adopt, reject, or convert. And the findings that we've come to is that accept makes sense, and that is what is being recommended to you. On that note, Gina, is there anything else you'd like to add? No? Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jason, Gina, and Chris. Questions from the table, Councillor Coe.
Thanks, Jason. As has been pointed out, this is just the start of a process. So today we're not approving the development. We're deciding what is the next step in the process. It seems to me that the reject option is perhaps the one we ought to start with, because in reading the documentation, it's quite clear that we have to have really good grounds on which to reject this application. So does that seem logical? That's a good starting point to say, first off, are there any grounds here by which we feel we ought to reject the application for the plan change, and then work from there? So it's kind of like a process of elimination. Would you concur with that?
Yes, we would, and if it is of assistance, the part of the report which looks at that, paragraph 52, and paragraph 51.
Right. So then, if we conclude that there are no grounds for rejecting it, then we have to really settle on one of the other two options. Just because
Yes.
because this is a legal process.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
if I may add that paragraph 52, we've noted that officers recommend there are no legally defensible grounds for rejecting this private plan change, which is discussed further in the paper at paragraph 66 to 68.
Right. So we need to decide whether we accept that recommendation. Yeah, that advice. Yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Just a quick question following through on one of the public speakers in terms of their questions. Are there any mechanisms by which we can introduce measures related to the public services within our wider community to support new developments through the RMA consenting process?
So what is being sought at this point is a rezoning of the site from rural lifestyle to a general residential zone with bespoke provisions relating to a retirement village. A resource consent would follow later on should the zoning be approved. There will be the ability for submissions, should the council accept this private plan change to be processed and notified. There will be an opportunity for people to make submissions, and that includes the council itself, to seek changes to the provisions that are proposed through this private plan change. What would need to be considered is whether the provision of social services is a matter that falls within the scope of the Resource Management Act, or whether that is a matter that is beyond the scope and the council needs to consider separately through other means. And I can't answer whether it is in scope at the moment or not without giving it more consideration.
Okay, that's cool. That's all the answer I needed.
And in terms of the footpaths,
yes, you can.
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
Again, it's not a matter for the plan change itself. It would be a matter should the plan change be approved and resource consent be applied for. If there are upgrades required to council's assets, infrastructure, then I would presume that would be dealt with either through the development contributions policy, which will come into play in terms of any additional demand that's put on all of council's infrastructure, Three Waters, roading, reserves, not reserves yet. Or it could be a condition of resource consent. So there are certainly means to address that issue later.
Great, but they're not part of this particular step
No.
that we're in at the moment. Thank you.
Richard Mansell.
Just a couple of questions, really easy ones. If the group decide to accept does the matter then get fully publicly notified? And I think the answer is yes. But how are we going to do it? Because we don't have a newspaper, and we've got a community that are very, very interested in this. At a previous application for change of land use in that area, council did letterbox drops to people they thought were affected. Is that something that council will do? I mean, this is going to be really big and really important. We need to get it out there that people know it's happening and how to get in and contribute to the conversation.
Thank you. It's a good question to raise at this time so that everybody can understand that. So we will follow what the Resource Management Act Clause 5 of Schedule 1 states around public notification. The steps are actually set out in paragraph 69 of the paper, and paragraph 69 lists sort of 3 different steps. While there isn't, it's obviously a shame about our local newspaper, but we will find a newspaper that has circulation in the district, and Dominion Post is probably the most likely choice there, I guess. There will be an online, on our website, public notice as well. And there will be, if you like, a letter drop for directly affected persons. That's a step after this meeting that staff will work through under delegated authority to determine. And we'll look at some of the issues that are associated with this in terms of transport, etc., to determine a catchment, if you like, around the site that would make sense in terms of identifying who's directly affected. I mean, I can say right now it's not going to be the entire district that gets a letter drop for a plan change of this nature, but it'll be more than just neighbours as well.
Okay, cool. The other question I had was around the process. So we go to public notification, assuming it gets approved, for the plan change, and assuming that goes through, they then have to go through the land use consent process. Is that publicly notified as well, or is that dealt with in-house?
This decision gets made later as that application is received, and staff look at the nature of it and the various notification requirements of the Act. But for plan changes, it's a lot simpler than that. It does get publicly notified, and as I talked about, there is a letter drop in those directly affected parties, but anybody can make a submission on a plan change.
Yeah. So potentially there's 2 bites of the cherry if you really want to be involved and get your point across. So potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just would point out there is an excellent online newspaper for the Kapiti Coast, but apart from that, it's on the interweb. So question around the ability to, or the process by which you might rezone, when I say you, we might rezone a broader area. So given that this is a development in the middle of what is currently rural lifestyle, and the plan is to change this into to general residential. So the question is, how does that impact the neighbours either side or behind or whatever that are still inside the zone that is zoned rural lifestyle? So if those people, for instance, felt they were going to be affected and they would like their piece of the pie turned into a general residential, can council just have a look at that in terms of just a general rezoning?
So I probably should start by clarifying that, getting back to the whole anybody can make a submission aspect. Of course, if neighbours have either concerns or suggestions, that they should be making a submission. They need to get involved with the formal process. That's really important. Need to stress that up front. I guess stepping back a little bit from this site and this private plan change process, the wider area is identified in the growth strategy as a medium priority greenfield growth area. And that signals some interest from council in that area being having a future that may involve some change. Whether or not council itself wants to perhaps take a more proactive role in enabling that growth and guiding that growth in a way that ensures it's the most optimal outcome in terms of that wider environment being integrated and connected and having everything in it that is within council's ambit to encourage, is a decision for council to make, and council will be looking at its future work program in coming months for the district plan, and that may well be an option that it wants to consider. So I guess we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, I would think good spatial planning would suggest that that's that's an approach worth taking. The other one, to the point that Kim made earlier, when there's given that we are creating an island in the middle of, there's an application to have a residential zone in the middle of rural lifestyle area, right? So part of the deal was that they would need to have they need to have a footpath. Well, you can't just have a footpath outside your place, right? Or can you? Because that's the question. So is it dirt track, footpath, dirt track? Right. You know? So this is the reason why I raised the spatial planning and the zoning for an entire area. So if something comes to town, and as a consequence of that coming to town, they require this particular service or amenity, does that then mean that it has to be extended? Or can they just look after their place?
I think I'm going to lean into, I think, some of the comments Gina made earlier, that in terms of the decision before you today, that wouldn't be part of the consideration for this decision. There will be subsequent steps in the future where those kinds of, I'll say, concerns, challenges, opportunities do come to the forefront. And there's several different ways that council has a role in that. So we did talk about development contributions and other contributions that we work through, and this would be further down the track, not today, to determine who needs to pay for what and what that looks like. Council does have planned work underway, as Jason's mentioned, in some for some opportunities for council-led plan change. And also we are looking at spatial planning across the district so we can work out some of those points. So those will inevitably come together, but won't be something that we're able to answer today.
Well, actually, the reason I raised it is actually because it is relevant, because one of the options is that we could adopt it. And if we were going to adopt it, these would be considerations to whether or not we did adopt. I don't think adopting it's a good idea at all. It's a terrible idea, but it had to be one of the options presented, right? But those sort of consequences are something that you would seriously consider if you were contemplating adopting it. But I doubt very much we would go down that track. No, that's it for me.
Cam Butler.
Ngā mihi here, Mana Hanford. Just stepping back a little bit and just looking at the big picture side of things. A, is this a development that we want? And B, is it a development that we want in that place in terms of planning?
Yeah, that's not the decision
really.
that's in front of us today.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah. Thank you, Kim. Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. So I just wanted to get some clarification on some of the, I suppose, some of the points, some of the wording that was used in the report. Paragraph 36. It says the site does not appear to be identified as an area where development is to be avoided or is subject to constraints. When you actually dig into the application, it talks there about heavy metals and other metals that are exceeding the adopted background levels. And I'm just wondering how that sentence actually fits with the report in terms of consistency, in terms of the information that we've been provided, please.
Contaminated land, which is the issue you're talking about in terms of level of metals in the soil, is dealt with under the National Environmental Standard on Contaminated Soils. It has a longer name, but I won't say all of it. That National Environmental Standard comes into play should the use of land change through a resource consent or a subsequent issue. They have provided an expert report, as you've identified, and the council has had that peer reviewed by a technical expert who's advised us that on the basis of the review that there are no reasons or constraints that the rezoning couldn't occur, and the more detailed analysis about development of the land and any conditions that may need to be imposed, including around land remediation, could be dealt with through subsequent resource consent stage.
I'm just double checking, hold on.
Sorry, Justin, did you have any other
No, I'm
substantive
just
questions?
double
Okay.
checking what it says in the report. No, thank you for that result. I mean, those comments. I suppose the other one is too, so our growth strategy, obviously we're going to consider updating and reviewing it. And so we have to work with the current one at present. But I suppose I think that we need to be mindful that it may potentially change, but not necessarily in this area. And I think it's just important to keep note of that as well. And the other point that I wanted to make was, I'm just jumping between these two reports, is...
Yeah, sorry, Justin, when you say making a point, is it a question?
No, I'm just making... Yeah, so I suppose it's a...
Could we save that for debate
yes,
then?
Okay,
Yeah, thank
yep.
you.
So then to 76, paragraph 76. 76. Yes, in respect to whether the council should consider adopting or accepting, 76.1, the officers consider the proposal is generally aligned with the district plan's approach. Where does it not align?
At this point, as it's been outlined in the paper, our analysis has very much been at a course, high-level analysis. The more in-depth analysis of assessment, provision by provision, of the proposal against the district plan would occur at the next stage, should the council accept or adopt it. But it would be fair to say, having reviewed the private plan change proposal and being very familiar with your district plan, there's nothing that screams to me this is inconsistent or contrary to the district plan.
Yeah, I suppose just the wording there. So thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Great, thank you. No other questions from the table. I'm not seeing any other lights. So that takes us to recommendations on page 8. Is there someone who would like to move? Councillor Warwick, seconded by Councillor Coe. Right of introduction, Councillor Warwick.
No, I'll waive that.
Waived. Contribution to debate? No, not Councillor Coe.
Look, I just want to commend staff on the quality of this report, which is absolutely excellent. There's a pretty compelling case here with all the information that's provided that we have no grounds on which to reject this application. We most certainly don't wish to adopt the request because that would incur cost for ratepayers. Let's go with the option of accepting the request, in which case the developer carries that cost. So, when you look at it logically, it's a logical sequence there. We eliminate two options. It only leaves us with one. And we have to do something because this is a legal process. So, and we're not saying today that we are approving the plan change or the development. There's a whole lot of water to go under the bridge yet, and lots of opportunity for people to make a submission on this. So, yes, I'm quite happy to support the recommendations from staff on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just reiterate that the process for this has been really thorough. It's good process actually, and some people might get the idea that by council approving this, that they're actually approving the project. They're not. They're approving the process, which is quite important. And so it's also important for people who may have issues with the project that that doesn't go away with this. That's basically just your starter for 10. But in terms of the options, I agree with Comrade Coe here. I think it would be a terrible idea to adopt it. There aren't grounds to reject it, and I don't think it would be a good idea to convert it to a resource consent. I mean, you could, but why would you? Why would the public bear the cost of a private enterprise? So, yeah, I'm really comfortable with the process, and I think people will get plenty of opportunity to feed into it from here on. But I would like, at some stage, that just in terms of that broader spatial planning, it's a consideration for us rather than them.
Thank you. Councillor Halliday.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. And look, I certainly agree with what Councillor Wilson was saying about the social aspect, as Kim highlighted as well. That's an area that we do need to start looking at because we do have such a large amount of growth and a lot of constraints in those areas. I just wanted to thank officers and Jenna for the briefing the other day, which really gave us a really good understanding, and as Councillor Coe said, an excellent report. So I'll certainly be supporting the recommendation. Main reason being it's an open process, and even the client itself has suggested they would prefer to have that open process, which means everyone can feed into it. Everyone can put their views in. Everyone can put the questions that need to. It's an independent panel that'll go through. So it's at arm's length from us as well with regards to that process. So no, I'll be supporting it, and be very interesting to see the process as it plays out. As Jason said, we haven't had one of these before, so it's from our perspective, it's going to be interesting seeing how this evolves, because by the sound of things, we might get some other ones coming through the pipeline sometime soon as well.
And Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Echo everything that's already been said, and just wanted to acknowledge the requester in this situation and the process that they've taken with staff and being proactive, and also their willingness to be as transparent as is possible through this process. So I think that's something to just be acknowledged, and invite other developers as they come to us to follow a similar process would be very helpful for us and for the public, because these decisions are important and we need to follow a good process. So thank you again to staff for that.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. So I know I've asked some questions about the wording in the paper, but I would like to thank staff for this report and all the work that's gone on behind it. I think it's actually really good that that this decision has come to this council, and you know, so that it's out in the open and so that it's transparent from the very, very beginning. I also want to make the comment about the social side of the impacts of these developments, and I know that often when we do have conversations with developers, it's sort of, they sort of feel that it's out of their hands looking at transport and housing and medical facilities. And I think in terms of going forward, spatial planning is really, really important, but I think we need to find a way of actually being able to have some better control over ensuring that the social aspects of these developments is actually in keeping with, I suppose, our lifestyle and keeping everything, you know, a nice place to live. Thank you. And I will be supporting what's on the table. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Pravanov. And yeah, just echoing the thanks that everyone has already conveyed very eloquently to staff. Jason, Gina, Chris, and the rest of the team. I'm sure there was behind the scenes a bunch of work that's gone into the preparation of this report and the recommendations that the information has culminated in. So, right of reply, Councillor Warwick?
Just support everything that's been said.
Great.
Thanks, Jason and Gina.
Awesome. Cool, so we've got recommendations A through F on page 8 have been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Great, thank you. Cool. So moving swiftly on to item 9.2, review of draft climate change mitigation strategy. So I think we've got Damien, Gina, maybe Jamie. Just Damien. Cool. Awesome. Welcome up to the table. Chris, did you want to make any introductory comments as the team comes to the table?
Thank you. Yes. I think I'd just like to note that it's a pleasure to bring the draft climate change mitigation strategy to the table. This follows on from an earlier decision this year that the council's made to break what was our original climate change strategy into separate strategies. So the first one that we are putting to the table is mitigation, and obviously that is a priority for us to push forward with. Reminded everyone in December 23 we had adopted an aspirational district-wide net zero target. So we today are bringing the draft strategy to the table. Really, it's to put it on the table to get some early feedback from you and to note that further steps will be underway. So as with the last paper, we're not asking you to approve the climate change mitigation strategy today. And I will hand over to Gina and the team to just make any comments, and then we'll open that to the table, really.
Thanks, Chris. And I think a good point to make that this is building on a lot of discussion that we've had over the past year with you, with our Climate Change and Resilience think tank, and with others as well. So we've heard what you've said about moving quickly in the mitigation section, and the team has done a great job pulling together a initial draft for you to have a little look at and provide us with some high-level feedback on. I'll summarise by saying, look, we really wanted to focus on maximising the benefits, which means looking at reducing those gross emissions rather than having a core focus on sequestration. Some of the benefits are, you know, saving money over time by adopting energy-efficient technologies, focusing on improving health outcomes by making homes warmer, drier, and reducing air pollution, and creating vibrant, compact, and better connected communities as well. We know that taking people with us will be really important on this. That's why it's reflected both in some of our core challenges, making sure this is an equitable transition, as well as in our principles. Any comments you'd like to make, Damien? No, that's great. So happy to take them.
Yeah, so I'm just going to note That's a great summary of the direction the paper, as we have discussed with you previously, for us to push forward and take steps towards achieving that aspirational net zero target that is in the strategy. A large part of the conversation in here is about working with others, being mindful of where council has a role and where we don't have a role. So you will see that distinction in here as well. So this is really about us working with the community and other partners to help achieve something that through Vision Kapiti and other surveys we have heard is important to the people in our community. Thank you.
Great, thank you to the team. Questions? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Kirby.
Mine's just a really simple clarification one around next steps. So trying to follow this process from initial draft through to when it goes out for consultation end of April. So just some clarity for me. 10.2 says that the final version will be reviewed by the Climate Environment Committee on the 8th of April, then presented to this committee, which is SOF, in May, which is after the consultation's already started there. But if I go back to recommendation E, it says that it comes back to here on the 10th of April.
Yeah, apologies. I think 10.2 is a typo. So it is, we're bringing this back to SOF on the 10th of April.
Okay, so we will see it again before it goes out for consultation
Yes,
in terms of the final draft. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, just be with me a little bit here. I've got two issues that I'd like to bring up, and aside from all the good work that's being done, I still have an issue with regards to just the words climate change being used. And the reason I have an issue with that is that there's nothing here to stipulate environment. And I think the environment impacts are just as important as the climate impacts, although the climate impacts are on the environment. But a lot of the conversation in here talks about decreasing emissions, et cetera, And the other part to it is also it's looking at closed circle economy, sustainability, all that sort of scenario. And I've brought this up before with regards to the waste side of things as well. But the first part of it is whether we should be, because pretty much with the three sub strategies here are climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, climate change resilience. But it doesn't actually put a focus on the environment with regards to that. And this comes through the committee. Sorry, it's just got a mind fart at the moment. The Climate and Environment Committee. And I'm wondering,
was there a question? Oh yeah, you're
so is at this stage there any consideration with regards to changing the name of this to include the word environment in it?
I think I might take that. We at the moment are progressing the suite of topics under climate change. Separate to this is an environment strategy that is also progressing through. So take your point about the importance of both. Absolutely, they're coming through because of the external pressures which have caused some delay in us progressing things as we'd originally wanted to side by side. We've pushed forward with that. At the next Climate and Environment Committee, we're going to be talking about the environment strategy, and looking at the elements of that and which ones we can push forward now and which ones might be slightly delayed.
I appreciate the clarity on that. Thank you very much. The next one is just me being. I've alluded to the fact that we have a waste minimalisation plan. And we're actually part of a regional group in the waste minimalisation space. There's absolutely no reference to that in this document. It talks about initiatives that have come out of that document, i.e. the Zero Waste Hub being one of them. But we actually have a plan here and it's got measurable outcomes. And I would have thought that would have been linked into this, or I should rephrase that, perhaps I would like it to be considered to be linked into this somehow as part of the mechanism for reporting back or just being a part of the process, because it's not a strategy, it's a plan, which is a bit weird, but it is something that is currently in place. We are a part of some solutions here as well. And there's a lot of that talks about business sustainability, all that sort of stuff's actually picked up as part of that process as well.
I'm just going to say thank you. The staff have noted that. We'll make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you through the chair. So, first of all, I'd like to thank the staff for the work that has gone, the considerable work that has gone into this, and through the climate, the task force that we had as well, and there was a major piece of work there. I suppose this is a great report, but I just wanted to, in terms of listening to the conversations through the think tank meetings, I know that there are two parts to a climate strategy. Well, actually, it's more than two, but I'll just focus on this bit to start off with. It's about what KCDC is doing, and it's what our community is doing. And in this report here, it talks about our approach, which I understand, but it's a case of maybe clarifying who our is and actually somehow including our community to be drivers of doing things as well, rather than it being maybe more KCDC centric. It doesn't have to be a great part, but just, a little few tweaks there. The other thing I just wanted to pick up on what Councillor Halliday was saying is that, to me, climate and environment are intertwined, and I heard the word you said separate, and to me, there is some intertwining there. So in this report, it talks about, in the terms of the strategy, it talks about forestry, it talks about agriculture. So could there please be a paragraph in there that actually maybe says that the environment component is coming along later, and that there are some relationships?
Yeah, both of those points have been noted.
Yeah, sorry, it was a
Councillor
long
Branham.
way to asking a question at the end.
No, but there's a lot of notes being scribbled down there,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, those were all of your
Yeah.
questions
Okay.
slash comments. Councillor Wilson? Councillor Wilson, yeah.
Thanks. So I know that this is all just noting. It's just a noting recommendation, so you're not wanting a decision on anything. My concern with some of these works is that the real world impact that they have on other work. So if you take what these strategies are doing, this is a sub-strategy as opposed to a strategy. I'm not quite sure what the classification of sub-strategy equals, but anyway,
Sorry, just making sure there's a question in this.
Well, yes, I like to give intelligent questions that are prefaced with reasonable remarks ahead of time so that you know what I'm talking about. And the primary thing here is that when you are developing a strategy or a sub-strategy, just as we had a massive strategy called the Whaitua Project, that has real-world implications on other policies of council. So when you're adopting these things, what is the corollary impact of that when you adopt those, and what's taken into account when you're doing those things? Again, it comes back to spatial. Everybody thinks spatial planning is about the built environment, and it's not. It's about the whole entire environment, right? So I just wonder about that. And so what impacts would this strategy or an outcome of this strategy have on something like, say, coastal hazard management, or so if you and again, I'll use the Whaitua scheme. The Whaitua scheme came back and said, you need to do this. And we went, oh, do we? What's the impact of that on all your other policies?
I think that's a great question in terms of, I hear you saying
Thank you for saying that. Actually, Sophie's noted that.
I hear you saying that when we set a strategy, we need to understand how that is executed or implemented and what the implications of that are. And that's a really good point. So I can say to you, and I think in our mitigation space, this strategy is going to sit above a lot of good work that is already underway. And so the reality is, if I look at it from a council perspective, we are funding things currently, and there's reference to some of the things like our action plan. waste minimisation, work in that space was mentioned as well. And in the community, there's existing things happening as well. So I think that's, for this strategy, a good news story, that we're really sticking a framework across that to say, how will we shift and how will we move into the future? More work is going to have to be done, and I think there will be further conversations into the future with partners. I will use the word investors, even consideration in our long-term plan around what activities council's doing, whether we're keeping doing what we do, more or less, all those good things. That's to come. So at the moment, this strategy is trying to say we've set an aspirational target. What are the levers or things that we could do together to actually make a difference to get to that aspirational target? And some of those things might be working in this district, some of those things might be advocation. So a lot of things in there that you'll see. So but it's a very good point. I will also just touch on sub-strategy versus strategy. The reason that we've called it a sub-strategy is not to come up with a new gimmicky term for something, but our intention is to push forward with a mitigation strategy, and Councillor Halliday had mentioned the other elements to that. Eventually, once they're all done, we're going to put them together and they will just become one strategy. So just to keep things simple, we're pushing ahead with what we're calling sub-strategies, just so people understand the connection. So that was the idea. If that word's confusing, we can always take feedback and find something more simple to say, but that's what we're trying to do. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, so thank you. Through the Chair, I would like to move recommendations A to E on page 21.
Great, thank you. I'm happy to second those. Right of introduction, Councillor Pravanov.
Yes, so thank you. I will be brief. So to me, a strategy is a guiding document, and later on, so it gives us a framework to then develop our actions. And so without a guiding document or some type of guide, we don't actually know where we're heading. And I know that this is actually a very small part of the climate component, but I think it's a very, very good start and there's more work to come. So I highly commend everyone to, obviously just noting, but to support what we're about to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. Agree with your comments. Mayor Holbrow.
Yeah, it's really great to have this on the table today. Thank you for the work that's gone in. So I don't think it needs to be called a sub-strategy. It kind of gives the optic that it's not important to us, or that it's sitting underneath something else, when actually these strategies are sitting side by side, and they're connected. And I'm wondering if we need some kind of visual or graphic or a separate section in the strategy to outline the alignment and where it sits, and that would be enough to kind of know where it sits among things. We have a lot of strategies that sit under other strategies and they're not called sub-strategies, so I think we can just lose that. So, well, that's my opinion anyway. If anybody thinks differently, feel free to say so during debate. So, to me, this is more aligned with the environment strategy than the climate adaptation strategy, in terms of the pieces of work that are influenced by it. And it's got more alignment with our resilience work than the climate adaptation strategy in terms of what we're doing. So if you take your head away from climate change a little bit and think about the kind of activities and the motivation behind what we're doing, which is caring for our planet and caring for our environment, then I think we can start to stop getting hamstrung by the connection between this and, say, seawalls or managed retreat or that kind of thing, which is a separate kind of consideration. It's a separate motivation. And I think it's really important that we have this strategy and that it sits and that it's seen as important and autonomous almost, to signal that commitment that we have, which is clearly outlined in the strategy. And so that would just be my kind of direction from today, that we see this as kind of intrinsically valuable not kind of just feeding into other kind of strategies or pieces of work. And so, yeah, that was just kind of how I was thinking about it. And then how we engage on this too, making sure that we have plenty of young people involved, that we reach out to our environment, stakeholder groups, all that kind of thing, and how we kind of draw resilience into the whole question as well. So in a more kind of general way. So they were just my thoughts, but it's a really great start. And I think the important thing is that we just get going, because we declared an emergency. So it's really good to have got this work done, get it on the table today so that we can get going with it. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Councillor Coe.
Right. I've been thinking about this a lot over the last 24 hours, and I think we're missing a great opportunity with this document. I think it needs significant rework, and I'll explain why. Because if you look at page 9, in terms of what does a low carbon kapiti look like, we're asking the community to do a whole pile of things differently. We're asking them to change their behaviours significantly to achieve these outcomes. We're asking them to move to public transport and electric vehicles. We're asking them to use solar power. We're asking them to reduce waste. We're looking at, and we're asking them to adopt Mataranga Maori principles. We cannot do anything much in this space without community buy-in and engagement. We need to make a compelling case in this document for why we need to do things differently and how we're going to do it. And we need to invite the community to work with us on this, to be engaged with us, because we can't do it alone. We need to be using this document to invite the community to say to us, to tell us how we can engage with them to bring about these outcomes. I guess, first of all, we need to know whether they're willing to accept some of these outcomes and work towards them. So to me, this is a major comms piece, and it needs a comms lens over it in terms of what are the key messages we want to give to our community in this space. Why is this stuff important? What's driving it? What's driving KCDC to take leadership in this space? What has the community told us already about why they think it's important and what they're willing to do? So make a case, because there will be some people in the community that say, this is just, motherhood and apple pie, a lot of nonsense. Why are we even looking at this? It has to be a compelling document that is a call to action for our community, and that puts council in that space of leadership and coordination, but acknowledging we don't have the resources to do this stuff ourselves. It's not going to happen without the community. It's not going to happen without central government coming to the party, without regional government coming to the party. And so it needs a lot of advocacy. It's a difficult space in which to achieve the outcomes that we want, because we don't have direct control of the levers. So to me, this is, it's a comms document. And I even wonder whether we use the word strategy or whether we use the word approach and put it out to people to say, let's start a conversation on this stuff. You've told us it's important. We think it's important. Here's some things that we need the community to do. Is this something that you'd like to do? Tell us what you think. Is it important enough for us to put some resource into it? How can we work with you? And just start the conversation. That's what I'd like to see it being. So it's not so much a strategy, but a conversation starter. And then, so it's a gradual process, and we use that input and then come back to further define our strategy. So that's my thoughts.
That's your contribution to debate.
Yeah, so I would like to see a much revised document come back that has that kind of approach to it.
Okay, I might just make some brief comments, Jocelyn, Councillor Bravano, before I pass back to you for a right of reply. Personally, I'm keen to see this be far more than just a comms document. I think in terms of honing on that point that Councillor Coe mentioned about the opportunity that we have through this. It isn't just about communicating, it's about clearly articulating our leadership role and what we are going to do so that the community doesn't just think we're farming this out to them to deliver on our collective aspirations as a table, which is for our district to be ideally net zero by 2040. I think that we can't afford for this to just be a comms document, because we have identified that we're in a climate emergency, and that means that action must follow. And so we need to get real about what that looks like for us as a council. And if we feel like we don't have the resource to make this stuff happen, well, then that's just, we haven't got our priorities straight. So I would come back to that. I think people are willing to accept these outcomes as being important for the future of our district. We did a really extensive climate survey of the community a couple of years back now and had, I believe, almost 1,000 responses, if not more. And yeah, definitely over 70% of people identified that taking action which is in line with ensuring an inhabitable climate for future generations is vitally important in terms of how we need to live and operate and get around. One thing that I did want to raise under the section Pathways to a Prosperous, Healthier and Low Carbon Kapiti, we've got noted there, to avoid locking us into a particular course of action, the following pathways are intended to provide a clear direction of travel while also being sufficiently flexible and high level. I think if we're going to go with that approach, we need to find ways of keeping these pathways and principles front of mind as we make decisions, because otherwise they do run the risk of just being another framework or another thing that we have the best of intentions to connect with, but without having kind of a clear implementation plan at this point in time. It is, we run the risk of the points in there, while all being very well-founded and relevant, we run the risk of them just being too high level and not clearly implementable and things that we can easily assign budget to and actually get this stuff and this action moving along. To the Mayor's point around the name of the sub-strategy thing, I really agree with that. And one of the things that resonates with me is kind of a map to zero. I feel like this is because it's focused on mitigation, it's our approach to reducing emissions, and that other parts of the climate strategy will come together to form a whole in due course, but that this could be, and it could be a way of enfranchising the community in that conversation too, is it's a collective map that we're charting together. This is council's role, this is community's role, and it maybe also makes it more inviting then for it to be what you're saying, a conversation starter, while at the same time clearly saying, these are the parts of the map that we recognise council will need to put in significant pūtea, significant money, and the community will need to make significant changes potentially to the way that they operate in Kapiti. And also that comes with enormous benefits for themselves as individuals, but our community as a whole. I also just wanted to say thank you to the team. I know this has been a bit of like a rub point as we've been trying to action the mitigation stuff without being held back by sometimes being fearful of the conversation and shying away from it because we think it might unsurface some kind of difference in views. But I think I appreciate how we've found a way to get on with the mitigation stuff and appreciate that we've come to a collective understanding of where we're at in that space.
Can I say a brief word in response?
Yes, Councillor Coe has already contributed to debate, and in the interest of time, we'll keep moving.
Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Coe. Right of reply, Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, through the chair. So as I said earlier, to me, this is a strategy that involves both KCDC and our community. In terms of comments that have been made in terms of our community, there has been a lot of initial engagement in terms of our community through the think tank. We had multiple meetings about how we were going to progress this, and one of the things that we talked about, had a lot of debate about, was how we bring our community along. And we realised, even those people who are very pro climate action, that there are some people who are not necessarily going to be wanting to do stuff. But I think people acknowledge that there are going to be early adopters and by seeing what is occurring. And I think the comms, both now and carrying on, is really, really important to actually show that little changes that you can make in your homes can actually make a big impact overall. So the comms thing is very, very important long term. I think it's really important that, to realise that this is one component of our climate strategy, and I think it's, I acknowledge that staff have worked on this one component rather than waiting until everything else is lined up, which probably would take a very long time. So I think it's really, really important to get this first part up and running. Very important that it is a strategy, and I think based on another comment that was made, it's really important to show how it fits together in terms of all the other strategies, and particularly the environment one that is going to be coming along later. So I think that it is a great document, really good to go out for consultation. I no doubt we will hear a lot of, get a lot of feedback, but I think we have got a really good grounding for the information in this document, and I think it's pretty good, except maybe some of the few comments that were made earlier on. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Provanov. Cool, so we've got recommendations on page 21. They've been moved by Councillor Provanov, and I've seconded them. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Those are carried. Thank you. Kia ora. Cool, so I think we might just press on. Yeah, we'll keep going and get through item 9.3, progressing the establishment of an urban panel for the Kapiti district. Jason, I believe, is joining us at the table, and just in terms of who we've got online, we've got Kim Tahiwi, Ngahapua, Otaki and Huriwai Paki. Councillor Kofod is not online at this point, so we're going to have to he's here in spirit through the urban panel being discussed, I feel. He's with us. Yeah, true, we're acknowledging him. Okay, Chris.
Kia ora. Today, talking to you about progressing the establishment of an urban design panel for the district. I just want to note that we, and Jace will give a bit more detail to this, but essentially we did take the initial work we had progressed on this to the Social Sustainability Committee, and you will see in here a reference to the discussion with them and the paper that went to that committee. So we've tried to summarise from that point where we've got to, seeking your decision today to progress next steps following our discussion at the Social Sustainability Committee, where there was support for taking a next step to effectively progress work to actually establish an urban design panel. I want to be clear that more work needs to be done for that to happen. So today we don't have details around the design or cost or any of that, because those decisions will come. We were asked to come back to you to firstly investigate it and then come back to you with what we'd found. So Jace may add to this, but essentially we, with the help of Councillor Kofod, obviously, who's not here today, have been progressing work for some time, and it's quite a pleasure to be bringing this to the table today. So Jace, I'll pass to you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. So it was only a month ago that we went to the Social Sustainability Committee and had a really good chat about this concept. So I'll try to keep it brief because a number of you were there. But the urban design panel, it's a new concept to think about in Kapiti. We've never had one before, but it's not actually a new concept for New Zealand. There are a number of councils around the country that have had and continue to operate a urban design panel. And many have done so for a number of years and are actually going through, if you like, a second iteration as they've learnt from their early efforts. So it is an established way of really improving urban design outcomes And we know that our communities here value the design of our urban environments. We also know with Transmission Gully, expected population growth and intensification occurring, that there is more pressure on the district to grow, and we have a community that really wants us to grow well. An urban design panel is one potential part of how we can do that. I don't want to over-egg that it is the entire solution, but other councils have told us they have found that it has delivered better quality outcomes in their opinion in terms of urban design. And we've had a conversation at the Social Sustainability Committee. There was certainly support for doing some more work at that level, and we've come to you today to really support where that committee got to and allow us to keep going and looking at some of the design parameters so that we can come back to council. And we've signalled early 2026 because we are aware of the amount of work that needs to be done. That work will include things like looking at what a terms of reference might be for a panel, the range of things that a panel might start to look at, things like potential thresholds for scale of developments that they might look at, as well as things like council work, council strategies, work that we might do on the ground in terms of new buildings, etc. over time. There's a lot of things that a panel could look at. There is issues around identifying membership of the panel. What kind of range of expertise council might want to have on that panel, from architects, planners, cultural design experts. Typically, we've looked at councils around the country who've been operating these panels, and they typically have quite a wide range, planners as well, and often, and I'm thinking of Auckland particularly, they've actually, when you think of the urban design panel, maybe think more broadly about a collective of these experts that council might like to select for a particular proposal or a council initiative. It might select from that bigger bucket the types of expertise that would make sense to support informing that particular proposal. So it can be more than just 4 or 6. It could be quite a large number of people, and different people get selected for different proposals. A couple of other things. The word advisory is important. The urban design panels around the country do not have decision-making responsibilities, is what we've found. They have an advisory role. Other councils are not forcing developers to go down that route. It is put there as a option, and a lot of this is around incentivising. Why would a developer want to go down that route? That leads me to a decision that council would have to make if you endorse doing further work around who pays for this. There will be a cost associated with this, and some of the advice that we'll be looking to develop for council to consider in the fullness of time will be around what those costs might be, does tie to the thresholds of what they get involved in, and is that a user pays system or is that a ratepayer system, and what are the pros and cons for each? We'll be working through those and a number of other things if you endorse the Social Sustainability Committee's recommendation that we get on and do some more work.
Great, thank you, Jason. Councillor Spires.
Jason, thanks for all the work you're doing on this, but you probably answered my question, but my question was going to be, this came to council in 2023 and you're coming back in 2026. It seems to be taking forever to get underway, and I just wondered, I think you've explained most of the reasons why.
Yeah, look, 2026 isn't far away, but 2025 was also different than 2023. And so there was actually, just to go back in time, the mandate for looking at this was post Plan Change 2. And that there was decisions made on Plan Change 2 way back in August 2023, and it was certainly realised at that time that Plan Change 2 was a bit of an earthquake when it came to the district plan. It has changed the district plan in a way that has enabled more intense development to occur than what the district plan formally did. We had a district plan that was all about low density and across the district. Plan Change 2 came in, it followed central government directions. Now there's greater intensity that is possible. So that the decisions that were made in August 2023 included looking at a lot of other work. There actually has been a decision made since then to extend the time frame that was identified back in August 2023. And I think there was a lot of work that needed to be done way back in that time. And things like looking at a coastal plan change and the prioritisation of that have certainly been heavy on the minds. But we're here now. The work has been done in a preliminary sense. And so this is really about seeking your endorsement as a committee to take that preliminary work and shine it up and keep going with it and get it to a point where actually a final proposal might be ready for you in early 2026.
Yeah, I just want to add to that point to say it was really important for us to engage with other councils to find out how this had worked. And what we discovered was that the early, the councils who took on urban panels and led the charge did have issues. And I'm going to call them growing pains that they learnt lessons from. And the benefit of us taking our time to go through the process of learning about that is that we do not need to bring that burden into our district. We learn from what didn't work and we don't do that. So I think it's not about doing it quickly, but doing it well. And so we will be bringing back in our proposal to you some different options and highlighting what we've learnt from others and what we're proposing to not do, including a feedback from different parties about what was effective and useful and why in some districts the development communities actually find it a useful thing to do. Second to that, but there's potentially a budget implication, and we are very aware that we are operating in recessionary conditions, that you have asked us to live to the LTP. There is not funding to bring into play with cost in urban panel currently. So we will be putting that on the table really in alignment to upcoming decisions about our next steps. So as well as what you said, Jace, I think there's some important things in there about why we have taken the steps we have to really unpack and understand. So when you said investigate, we really did. This wasn't just a quick and dirty. We've done quite a bit of work on this. And also in the paper you'll see that we talked in depth with the Social Sustainability Committee around there's protocols set nationally and a whole framework that others are operating to that we have not been working to in this district. So it's another lever or tool, if you like, in our suite of tools really that we're putting on the table to grow well. So we've really explored that and thought about how it's going to fit in to where we think we're heading and the other things we're talking to you about. I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Coe.
Look, I just have a question about where the public art panel fits into this. There are some synergies, I guess, potentially between an urban design panel and the public art panel. How does that work?
Happy to take that question as something we can follow up on. When we had looked at what other districts have been doing in regards to the urban design panels, I think you would see professionals who may be architects or designers or a whole bunch of professional or professions that come into play. So we can look at that. The blending in of any other public art panels or similar didn't feature in what other districts had been doing. That's not to say we can't look at it, but just to say it isn't something that we discovered when we looked around what others were doing, although I do acknowledge it is part of the look, feel and character of the community. So we can pop that down and come back to you.
Yeah, because because we have urban designers on our public art panel, well, at least one anyway, couple. Yeah, there is, to me, there's a lot of synergy there. I presume other councils do have public art panels, do they? Or I don't know.
We'll come back to you. I think what I'm saying is a good question.
Yeah,
we
good
can't
point.
answer that today, but we'll write it down, and when we do come back with our proposal, we'll make sure we've covered that off.
Because it may be the public art panel is kind of like a subset, if you like, of the urban design panel, or, you know, they need to be really working closely together, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Good point. Richard Mansell.
I'm just going to put my grumpy developer's hat on and think that this just seems to be, or is it, another layer of bureaucracy over the top of development that people have to manage their way through, or is it, as you alluded to, an optional thing? So that would be my first question. Second would be the cost. Presumably all your panellists will be paid by somebody. And if it's optional, you're not going to get a developer, this is probably more debate, you're not going to get a developer to come in and pay for something that he doesn't really need if it's optional. So
Yeah.
it
I'm happy to.
seems to be a problem, or it's fixing a problem that doesn't exist.
I might just note that I've been out talking to a range of developers, planners, professionals over the last 6 weeks. And some of those professionals work at a national level, and they've specifically talked to me about urban panels in the context of the benefit to the resource consent process. And in some parts of the country, the urban panel, depending on how it's set up, has actually facilitated what has been considered a more streamlined process/discussion through the resource consent process, particularly for larger developments. And so I think that's something that, as we think about how we would propose to you an urban panel could be used, we'd be looking at the different ways the panels could operate. What's good for a large development may not be as beneficial for something small. So there was in Auckland, for example, the panel meets depending on the development, who's around the table. The applicant and the planner processing the resource consent attend the panel and hear from those professionals, and the resource consent process looks to take into account what that panel has recommended or discussed through that process. So whilst it's not binding, it's been a way to streamline some of the issues that might occasionally crop up. So perhaps more detail and things to work through. We would not be looking to establish something that felt like more red tape. I think it has to be beneficial for the process, and obviously something that is cost effective and supports us to run an effective and efficient process organisationally, but also in terms of our regulatory role. And I will say that, yes, the professionals are normally paid.
Yeah, so it would need to be a suitably large development to afford to be able to go through that process. And
Yeah.
there's probably not that many that happen within Kapiti.
Certainly not intended to be a two-lot subdivision infill level, no. I just wanted to acknowledge your point, because there's no point setting something up that no one's going to use. And so we did anticipate engaging with developers in the course of, assuming there is some support from the committee, over the next few months to explore what would a panel look like that developers would want to engage with. There has to be a really significant consideration.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kirby.
I'm happy to move the recommendations, Madam Chair.
Great. Yeah, we can
Questions here.
though move in second, and questions can be asked any time. Is there someone who'd like to second? Mayor Holbrow. Yeah, we'll just go through a couple more questions if that's okay. And then we can come to you for the right of introduction. Councillor Wilson?
My questions often take the form of debate, so.
All
I'm
right,
happy
could you
to vote.
pop your mic off then?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick?
My understanding of the urban panel was a bit more of a district kind of view, connections, cycleway, walkway, bridleways, being able to connect through the community and all that kind of stuff. So how does with development that's quite different, how would the urban panel fit into that with regard to overall planning so that we end up with a district that is really user friendly, active mode friendly, all of that stuff? Like, would the panel be used for council, not just developers?
That is absolutely an option for council to consider, is not just having the panel looking at large scale developments, but actually assisting council with master planning and with key strategy development and review.
Thank you. Noted. Did you have Councillor Pravanov?
Yes, so
Question?
thank you. I have a very similar question to Councillor Warwick, and I suppose this is looking at it from a holistic point of view. And I really support this urban planning panel. But how does that actually fit into this with the spatial planning that is in the pipeline? Because, so we're looking at the urban component, whereas you can actually put little urban bits all over the place, but in surrounding those bits, there's not necessarily, it's not urban. So how does all this fit together? Or would it fit together?
I think I'm going to say today we're asking you to give us the tick so that we can come back and give you a proposal for how we think we could utilise an urban panel in our district. Our first step of work had been to look at what are others doing and does it make sense? Is there an opportunity? And we got to, yes, we think there is. We then are going to do I will say, a bunch more work so we can come back to you guys and say, hey, we think there's 1, 2, 3 options we could use. This is where it would fit and what it would do, and here's the cost that comes with it. Mindful of the comments that, hey, we could use it across what council's doing and for this and that. We could, and we would need to, we'd be obliged to let you know how much that costs to do so. So we're going to be looking at how could we make small incremental changes and utilise this concept to what would a big bang with a price tag next to it look like. So that's the work we need to do to come back to you with. The urban design panel is actually one of the elements of our master planning. So as we come back to you, I think I've said already in another forum that on the 18th of March, we're going to give you a bit more information about how all those bits are coming together and the timing of them. I guess, challenge with something like master planning is we already have things underway. It isn't going to be a, ta-da, we're going to do all this and we press go. We're already doing some things, and it's just making sure that as we bring it together, we can see how it fits. So it will fit together. It will, and as you see the proposals, we'll make sure that we outline what we think the connection is and the benefits and the risks that go with those options.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Kirby, right of introduction.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to try and just channel Councillor Cofford for a second. Mountains to see, green belts, view shafts, and good design of our built forms. They have to be said in a debate like this, don't they? Those things without. And Otaki International Airport. So this is my nod to Councillor Cofford. I think what Chris has just said is really important, that this is part of a suite of works that we're looking at as council to improve the outcomes of how we develop going forward, that we have good growth that aligns with the outcomes that we see in Vision Kapiti, which are the importance of our natural environment, looking after what it means to be a Kapiti Coast resident, the things we love about being here. This particular thing of urban design panel is just one part of that bigger picture. That I want to see some more information come back to us on how we can make it work. So that's what I see this doing, is providing us that opportunity, because I think everyone around the table is very aware that PC2 raised some pretty, and I think Jason's comment was it was an earthquake to our district in terms of our planning and what was enabled through that process. That raised some significant concerns in our community, and those are ongoing. And I don't think we are unaware of that around this table. So I would see this as being part of our response to those concerns. Unfortunately, they do take time to make sure that we do the work well, that serves future generations of our district well. We can't make any mistakes in this space because the impact of it could be generational. So I want to encourage people to vote and support these recommendations that are on the table for the next steps of this urban design panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cofford or Deputy Mayor Kirby. Councillor Wilson.
Yep, thanks. All these things sort of, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And there's clearly a bunch of problems here. I think when the district plan goes to sleep, its nightmare is plan change too. And so how do we deal with that and consequences of that? The conversations seem to be focusing around developers, and I understand, and I'm sure on Richard's part it wasn't a confession, but all developers aren't bastards, and I think a lot of developers really want. Yeah, you can have that in writing. I've said that out loud. Most developers that I'm aware of want to integrate their development into the community. They want it to be the best possible development it can be. And that's the vast majority of developers. I think what this does is this facilitates that. It helps that happen. I know developers got to they're looking at their bottom line, but again, the quid pro quo, I think, is the resource consent process, and how you can make your resource consent process go a whole lot easier, I think. Anyway, and it is called the Urban Design Panel, so it's a kind of more than just a development as a whole about urban design. And I think Jocelyn made the point that urban isn't an island. Urban is surrounded by not urban, right? So how do those developments and how does that urban part of our councils, how does that fit in with the rest of our community and those relationships? So I think that's quite important. The other thing, I know Abbas did a bit of a tiki tour to a few councils and that, which was really helpful information about who else is doing this. But I would also suggest that if you went to AI and said, can you design us an urban design panel for the Kapiti Coast, and then you had an iterative approach with AI, which wouldn't just look at councils in New Zealand, it would look at councils all around the world in nanoseconds and come back to you. And then how would that urban design panel fit in with the broader spatial planning that this district requires? Because for me, that's the fundamental. This is part of a broader spatial plan and how that might fit. So we've had the conversation already today about how everything is holistic and how all the bits of the jigsaw fit together, and I see this as being a really important part, and just would absolutely acknowledge Councillor Cofford, who the term banging on doesn't sort of get close to it. He's really been pushing this, and it's just brilliant. There you go.
Richard Manso.
I'm back. And I'm grumpy, and I'm a B word. I'm very concerned about the cost of participating as a developer. And I would like a lot more work done on that for this when it comes back to council. I also am very worried about somebody's personal opinion, because you get two architects in the room and they won't agree on what looks good, because only the one who designed it will think it. You allow on people's personal preferences to determine your environment, and I think diversity of opinion and design is probably better. It also seems to me that we have plans and we have policies and we have all sorts of other things that already cover a lot of this. As Councillor Wilson pointed out, no developer's going to develop something that's rubbish. The whole idea of doing that, developing rubbish, is just counterproductive. If I had my time again, I would do coastlands completely different. But you're building on, in our situation, you're building on 50 years of work, and you just try and improve it incrementally. A design panel, I think, is an overreach. I could support A, because Rob's, and B, but not C, and probably not D, but I don't get a vote. I think it's in a district as small as ours, it's possibly unneeded. So, thank you.
Councillor Coe.
I think we should acknowledge the work that Rob's done on this, even though he's not here. Needs to go on record that he's been a passionate advocate for this, and you know, we've seen a lot of sensitivity in our area to growth, and you know, the earlier agenda item today is one example of that. People are concerned about growth. There's not a lot we can do to stop our growth, but we need to make sure that our growth is good and that we don't lose the character of our district, and this is one way we can do that. I would like to see more detail in terms of the financial implications and responses from developers, you know, whether they think this is a good idea, whether it's something they would use. How well has it actually worked in other areas to improve outcomes? And I think while we haven't perhaps seen a lot of need for this to date, you know, we've got a lot of growth ahead of us. So I think the past is not an indication of what the future is going to be. And, you know, I think we're on the map as far as developers are concerned. So I think now is the right time to be looking at this. We want to make sure we've got the right frameworks in place so that, you know, that the growth we do have is good growth, and that we encourage good development. So, you know, I'm supporting taking it to the next stage of getting more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Holbrook.
So, thank you for this work. It's been really good to finally progress it. I would just like to say, in terms of recommendation A, this should not be regarded as a precedent for individual councillors to be highlighted in the recommendations for their advocacy. But I think in this case, it has been so relentless and so determined and so crucial to actually getting this on the table that it is appropriate. But that doesn't mean we're always going to shout out to councillors in the recommendations, just saying. So in terms of finding out more about what these urban design panels can look like, it's useful to look at the individual councillors, but councillors might be interested in looking at the MFE document, Urban Design Panels, which provides an outline of some of the issues that we've been talking about today. There are a lot of councils that have these and find them useful, and small ones and large ones. And we're now at a point where we're going to be able to work out, with a little bit of water under the bridge of some of the difficulties that we've had post Plan Change 2, what have been the problems? What are we trying to solve? How might an urban design panel help? So it's actually really good timing, because we've had a lot of growth, but it's not stopping there. Everybody wants to come and live in our little swamp. So it's really good timing. It's a really good initiative, and we can make it what we need it to be. and costs and everything else can fall into place later. But it's something that will be really valuable and make this district a great place to live with the facilities and design that's going to work for people. Because it's not easy. Growth isn't easy. There's pressure of growth, the community changing. It's not easy. And it's not always positive. And this is a positive step we can put in place to address some of that. So congratulations to Rob, congratulations to the team, and I really look forward to seeing this taking shape.
And Councillor Warwick.
I just think we've got a lot of advisory groups and panels and stuff. Some are paid and some are unpaid. So part of the next step could be to socialise an idea that people are voluntarily doing this rather than being paid. I'm not sure how that would land, but we have a lot of professional people who are on other things that don't get paid. So it's worth exploring, you know. It's
Councillor Bravano.
Yeah, thank you. So I certainly support developing the proposal for this urban panel. You know, I suppose I've seen and I've heard, you know, some of the concerns about how some of our designs for developments have progressed, and even subdivisions. And so to me, it's important that that we move forward in the best way possible. You know, I know there have been conversations about budget implications, whether that's put onto the developer or the person who's doing the work, but or whether it's put on ratepayers, I don't know. But to me, I think some of those upfront costs will actually have, if it's done correctly, long-term financial benefits, and I suppose just social benefits for our district. I note in the report that there were, I think there's 4 examples, and there were, I think, 3 councils are actually highly urbanised, and there was one that was not quite so much. And I'm just wondering whether or not there are any other examples of districts that are similar to us that might incorporate, that have urban panels, so that you can actually sort of see these, you know, how potential urban developments occur, you know, as an island in a district that has rural aspects to it. So I'm certainly going to support this, looking forward to how it develops, and certainly acknowledge all the hard work and the determination that Councillor Coford has put into getting us to this point today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bravano. In relation to the question around specific examples that are parallel to Kapiti, the team will look into it and bring that back at the next stage. Great, right of reply. Let's vote. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That's carried. Councillor Coford. Someone message Councillor Coford and tell him. We'll just message him at once and bombard him. Okay, that takes us to... Oh, thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Thanks, Chris. Confirmation of minutes. Page 43. Moved. I'll second that. Yeah, thank you. Superb minutes. Always great. All those in favour? Aye. Against? That is carried. So it takes us to our closing karakia. Kia tau ngā manakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa, kia hua ai ki makihikihi e ki ana, kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te mauri, ki roto i a mātou mahi katoa tēnei rā, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Great. Kia ora, thank you everyone. Yeah, we're over an hour early.
Have that in your diary.